Welcome to the Nutritious and Delicious podcast with me, Bethany. Our mission is to support busy parents all over the world to learn time management while taking care of your nutritional, physical, and mental health. After all, a healthy family starts with a healthy parent. So I'm so excited. I have Gina here with me today. And Gina is a certified pediatric sleep coach, and she's the founder of Lula by Gina Sleep Consulting, and she's the mom of 4 boys. As you can imagine, she knows all too well that sleep deprivation and what comes with the parenting and the toll that it can take on your mental and physical health. After struggling through her own exhaustion, gaining control over consistent sleep became a priority in her home. So, welcome, Gina.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to kind of talk to you because we have a lot of moms in this group and they're asking a lot of questions and everything. So, they've been asking for a sleep consultant and to actually come on here and give us kind of a know-how of like what to do without the chaos and the stress around sleep. So this is today why we have the topic of called thriving through bedtime routines. Now, this is a difficult one for I find a lot of parents. So let's dive in and kind of give us sort of where you started as a sleep consultant and maybe a personal story that you could share with us and why you are equipped to help these mamas.
Great. Well, thank you again for having me. So I'll give you that background on me. About 10 years ago when I had my first, obviously as a new mom, which I can imagine all of you new moms can appreciate. And even when you do this the next time around, the sleep deprivation is like, it rocks you to the core. Like you just can't believe that you actually feel this way. It is exhausting and it's ongoing, and it's really hard to keep that momentum going as a new mom or as a mom in general when you feel that way. So when that first happened, I was like, what is this? Oh my God, I was so exhausted. And I worked really hard at trying to get my oldest son on a sleep schedule, and it was a lot of work, and he adapted pretty well. He adapted pretty well with it. And then I had twins, and I was like, that sleep deprivation is like really like nothing else. Like I felt done. I was sleeping on the couch because my oldest was upstairs sleeping. I didn't want to wake him. My husband was working. He was so busy. And so I was just staying down there with them. One was awake, the other one was asleep, and then they would sort of switch. And it was so exhausting. I would sleep. I was basically down there for a couple months, just doing this every single night. And the dread of it was like, it was awful. Okay, it's, again, tonight I had my water on the side. I had, the TV on, all the things that, you probably shouldn't be doing. I was just trying to keep myself awake because I was so exhausted.
Right.
And I always remember the story, and my husband and I always bring it up. It's just, there was one night where I was just defeated. And he heard me crying on the couch. Like, I can't do this anymore. I am so exhausted. What's happening? I know how to do this. I've done this before. I know the methods that you can implement, but when you're in it and you're so tired, it's hard to see what you really need to be doing, and hard to put it all into perspective, and hard to gain control of it. And so I got the help, and I hired a sleep consultant to help me, and it changed my life. It really did. And because I was already passionate about this before, doing this with a consultant really opened my eyes to a lot of new things, and I learned a lot more, and I studied more on it, and it became a huge focus and a value in our home. And I began helping friends and family. So when they would have their new ones come in, whether it was their first, whether it was their second, or even their third, they would call me like, Gina, can you help us with this? Can you help us with this sleep? They're not napping. What's the situation here? And I was like the go-to person, always helping.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I don't want this to be just that. I want this to be more.
Right.
And so I got certified, and I joined a community of amazing experts, and I love what I do. And I help a ton of families all the time. And I teach parents and children the skills they need to sleep well. And
That's
everyone's
awesome.
happier, and I love it.
I love that. I find a lot of the times it comes from a place of passion, Myself included, actually, because a lot of obviously the moms and stuff that we deal with have postpartum depression, anxiety, and what you just said about the whole like the first time child. I had that same sleep deprivation with my first very colicky baby. He didn't like to sleep. I did, but it didn't seem that I actually fell asleep, and it started to cause anxiety. So every time I would put him to sleep, knowing he would probably only sleep for a 2-hour stretch, even at bedtime, I would literally be awake, just like waiting for him to start crying. And then the cycle would continue. And I probably should have got sleep training. Like I never did, but you kind of, like you said, when you're in the thick of it, you're kind of delirious, even to the point where I remember going out during the day with him and being like, am I even wearing shoes? Like, so I can't remember if I put them on. Like I was that like,
I hear you. I really,
yeah.
And it's that anxiety that you feel. I see it with a ton of my parents that I work with, and I felt it myself, and I see it with friends, and I see it with family. It's like you go through the beginning where your child isn't sleeping, and you get a little bit used to it to a certain point, and then it goes on for so long, and you're trying to fix it, and they wake up early from a nap, or they wake up early in the morning, or there's another wake up in the night, and you're like, what am I doing? Am I doing something wrong? Like, what is going on here? And it's a lot of anxiety that you carry with you until you can get a hold of it.
Right.
And sometimes you need that help to be able to see it outside of your own personal situation.
So I guess with kind of experiencing like family, friends first and everything like that, like what are some of the main problems with moms after having kids trying to kind of get their own sleep? Like what is something that you're like, okay, there's like 3 things here every time I like deal with this. Like what are those things that you find?
Yeah, there really are. There's 3 things. I mean, there's a few things for sure, but there are 3 things. And the first thing that I do notice is that a lot of moms, in particular, parents for sure, but a lot of moms feel that it's expected, like it's accepted that they should be this tired. So they own it. They kind of, have a badge of that this is how they're supposed to be. And they don't make any changes around it because it's like, your mom, you are, especially when you're a new mom, this is what happens. People sort of say to you, oh, you're going to be so tired. You're going to be exhausted.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck with that for sure. Yeah. And it becomes expected, like almost as if you complain or you make a bigger deal about it. It's
what did you expect? You had a baby.
Yeah, exactly. You had kids. This is what you're supposed to be living through. And I mean, I get it. The beginning in the newborn stage, definitely your kids waking up a ton to eat. They're new. This is what happens. But beyond that, you need the sleep and your kid needs the sleep. Right. So, I mean, obviously you get the sleep once your kid gets the sleep, but it's important to also understand that our kids need that sleep to grow. They need that sleep to emotionally regulate. They need that sleep, like physically and mentally. They're retaining so much information in the day. Like that's when they're sleeping, that's when that information is being stored. Like they need that. So that's a priority. And then we do get sleep once that happens. But it's important to actually remind ourselves of that and value the sleep that we need to be getting. So I think that expectation, I would love for it to be changed. And I would love for moms to understand that they deserve that sleep. To be a good mom and to be on for your kids 24/7, you need that rest. So you get your kids rest and then you make those routines for yourself. So I find that a lot of moms feel that that's an expectation. Right. Another thing that I notice is that parents are often afraid of change.
Yes.
So I recently had a client who their schedule was very off. It was really difficult. Their child was waking up super, super early in the morning. There was a couple night wakings. And so I revamped their schedule, put like a solid plan for them together. And we walked through it. And one of the first things that mom was sort of saying to me was, well, what about when we have dinner at this time? And then we have to change, this has to happen at this time. And then what about the morning? We're not used to really doing this. This is what we usually do. And I was like, I get that. And if you don't want to make the change, I totally get that. I'm not pushing anybody, but you're not comfortable in this situation.
Right.
And change is hard. And once you get through it and once you get into the routine that you are happier in, it becomes second nature now. So we have to understand that there's flexibility in routine. Right. And so once you get past that nervousness about change, then you get into a routine that's comfortable, that works. and you actually don't have to think that hard about it anymore. Whereas like, how many moms do you meet that new moms especially that think about sleep basically 24/7?
Right.
So it becomes a little, it just becomes easier to go through the flow. And then also I remind moms that when your child is so little, change is happening all the time.
Right.
So from 3 months to 6 months to 8 months to 10 months, there are big changes happening, and there are wake windows that are expanding, and there's a lot of new things that are going on when your child's developing. And it's not a difference between a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old. This is a 3-month-old to a 5-month-old or a 6-month-old is a big difference. And so we have to be comfortable with change. And that's when you get adjusted and you're able to fall into a better sleep pattern. So I always advise parents that I'm with you. I'm here. Change is okay.
It sounds like a lot of the parents are sort of resistant to changing a routine because they're kind of like, okay, well, we're set in like what we're doing, but you don't realize what you're doing isn't working. And that's why you called me in. And same with, you know, things like weight loss and all this stuff as well. I think people are very scared of change, but like you said, you made a good point, is that babies are changing. Like for the first like year to 2 years, they're such a different kid. And whether or not, you know, you're making changes or not, the baby will definitely make changes. Like they go through like sleep regression and you know, teething and different like crazy things that you're like, wait a minute, I had this routine down packed, now I have to change and shift. So you'll do it with your kid, but you won't do it for yourself. And that's what I run into a lot with parents as well. So is there anything else that you've noticed, that another thing that you run into?
Yeah, I do notice that I find a lot of parents come to me and they say it's mainly that they just don't know what to do. And this happens for your child's sleep, and it happens for your own sleep. They just don't know what to do. And there's a lot of information out there. I mean, you can, you know, none of it's a secret. You can Google how to get my child to sleep through the night, and you'll find a ton of articles and you'll find a ton of information. But it's like, how do I implement this into my schedule? How do I make this work for my family, for my child, for what my needs are around my schedule and my lifestyle? And they just don't know what to do, so they just don't do anything.
It's information overload for people.
Yeah. And so I find that when you can narrow it down, you can put it into a clear structure, and that's what I help my families with. But when you can really just say, okay, these are my goals. They don't have to be, you don't have 10 goals, you have 2 goals. These are my goals. These are the things that are important to me. This is what I want to change. And you make you go baby steps to try to get there. But you just, it's taking those steps and just starting and just doing it and making those changes and changing your mindset and saying, I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to, you know, once I put in the work, you'll see an improvement. So I find that a lot of parents just like, I don't know where to start. I don't know how to do this. So that's where I can.
I think a lot of parents, especially moms, rely on Google. when I remember doing that myself, being like 3 a.m, like, how is this like still happening, you know? And I was thinking of this before when you were kind of first telling me things, because I did it myself with my first especially, but I think we gravitate to relying on crutches for certain things. Like for me, my first wouldn't, like, he couldn't not be rocked to sleep because I probably trained him that way, right? So every time I put him down and he was still, he would wake up. So the way I sort of went about that was I had a swing that would lay down, and finally that was the only way I could get sleep. I put the swing in my bedroom. And then one day the motor broke because I overused it. I was one that you could plug in, so it wasn't battery operated. So I'm like, this thing needs to go forever because it's the only way he'll stay asleep. And I can actually go back to bed and have like 4 hours of sleep or something. So we did that. I remember one day I woke up and the swing wasn't moving. I'm like, no, I have to buy a new swing. I was like, what? But he was fast asleep. So I was like, you know, and my second was... My second was completely different. I just put him down and literally he was out, and I'd be like, what's wrong with him? You know, like just completely different babies. But I get it. Like I remember so many nights just pacing the hallways with him and like trying to rock him to sleep and nurse him to sleep. And it was like, you feed them to get them to sleep, or soothers, and the soother would fall out and then he'd cry because he couldn't get it. And then it was like, how am I gonna do this? Like without holding the soother in the entire night for him. It's like it was like I wasn't letting himself soothe, you know. Whereas my second, I actually like let him discover he had a hand, and he still does to this day, sucks his fingers. So
Yeah.
he learned how to self-soothe. Was my eldest was like, nope, like I wasn't interested, right?
Yeah, and those props become it's a huge crutch,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I understand why we're doing it. We're exhausted, and that's how our child is falling asleep. But
Right.
then you do it for so long that it becomes a problem. I mean, look, we have, as adults, we have our own props to essentially we don't need them. We can adjust without them because we're adults.
Right.
But it's like, if someone took your pillow and your blanket away and your
Yeah.
bed away and you had to sleep on the floor, you'd probably be like, this is not comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't love this, for sure.
Yeah.
You could, as adults, we could we could help ourselves fall asleep at that point, but it's not comfortable and it's a huge adjustment. And so the same goes for a baby. They're crying and they're upset when you're making those changes and you're taking those props away. It's because they're not used to it, and they're frustrated, and then they get used to it, and there's a few days, and it's really only ever a few days, and then they find a new way of sleeping. And I mean, they're not sleeping on the floor. They are sleeping in a comfortable crib, and they're cozy, and they're in their sleep sacks and their cozy pajamas, and they do find a way to fall asleep on their own, and they don't need you to come in and intervene. So that makes them have a good sleep, and then you have a good sleep. So
with all of that, with all of the chaos that comes with, setting all this up, do you have any tips to kind of help us get better quality of sleep, to have a more structured bedtime routine?
Yes, a bedtime routine to me is so key.
Yeah.
We have our own. Again, I always relate it to adults because it's not so much different. We do have our own. If you really think about it, you say, okay, go into my room, I brush my teeth, I wash my face, I get my pajamas on, and we have a way of cueing our body into sleep. So the same goes for a baby. So they have to cue themselves into sleep. So I would have like a solid bedtime routine, 20 to 30 minutes, nothing too long, nothing too short, just so it gets them understanding what that is. So what that looks like. So what if you end with a book or a song, then as you keep doing that, it cues their mind to say that song is coming up, and then now it's time for bed. So I would always make sure that you have that solid bedtime routine in there, and you do that every night. And it's easy for you because once you do it every night, it becomes natural for you. It's not always chaos. We have a structure. We know what's going on every single night. And what I always say to all of my families, number one is consistency. So you have a bedtime routine, do the same thing every night. Obviously, there'll be a couple of slight changes here and there based on the night and based on how many kids you have, but consistency is key. So it really just teaches our children what to expect. And when they have an expectation that's predictable, then they're not going to push back because they know that it's coming. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a fight. So it's like when we tell our kids, we're leaving the park in 5 minutes. We're not saying we're leaving right now. We're giving them those cues. We're giving them that understanding. So we just giving them that kind of respect and understanding that they're in this too. And so teaching them that there's that routine so that they're not surprised by the end. Oh, I'm going to bed now. So that's always great to have. Another thing that I think is super important. I love early bedtimes. I don't know about you, but to me,
I was like that with my boys.
Yeah, it's key. Obviously one, because, there's many reasons, but you want to start your night early. You have a lot of things to do. You want your child to get a good night's rest. But what we do need to understand, and what I talk about with my families, because there's a lot, sometimes they feel that if their child goes to bed later, then they might wake up later, and it's not the case, and it's often a question that I get asked fairly often. What really happens is our body clock and our child's body clock is set for a specific time in the morning. So generally our children are set to wake up between 6 and 7. So if they go to bed at 10 as opposed to 7, they're getting less sleep. And a child needs like 12 to 16 hours of sleep. So they're just going to be getting less sleep. So starting off early in the beginning of the night is just going to help them have that great long stretch that they need, that restorative sleep that will help them go through the day. So I always say early bedtimes, get that between 6 and 8, but I know a lot of families get between 7 and 8 to accommodate for dinner and all
Right.
of that. But based on your particular situation, I'd say an early bedtime, before 8 o'clock is always best.
Right.
Yeah. So
I wanted to ask
go ahead.
some questions around that, just
Sure.
because I'm thinking of my own boys kind of in that
Yeah.
scenario. I definitely did that myself, especially when they were, I'd say, under the age of 5, both of them.
Mhm.
So bedtime was usually like 6-ish. Like, it seems early,
Yeah.
but I would feed them dinner like between 4 and 5. And sometimes it depended on if it was the summer and it was a little bit later kind of thing. They would probably go to bed more at 7, I would say.
Mhm.
But it was very much early bedtimes, and I noticed if we were out doing anything and I was like, oh, we really should get home because like I know they're gonna get cranky and stuff. And we get back at like 9 or 10, yet they were up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, and it was
Mhm.
just always the same. And they actually slept longer when I put them to bed earlier, and they were so much more well rested. And I
Right.
got a lot more done in my night, like if moms are trying to work from home and things like that, or you just need time with your partner or time by yourself, like that's a good way to kind of give yourself a buffer of time before you go to bed, that you're not stressed out, that you can do kind of me time.
Yeah.
That I find for a lot of moms that don't get that, because again, they're letting their kids sort of stay up with them, and then you're sort of not having that connection with your partner, and then you're battling with your kids trying to get them to bed when you're trying to go to bed.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
And what I notice across the board is that a baby that doesn't sleep well becomes a child that doesn't sleep well, becomes
yeah,
an older child that doesn't sleep well, and so on.
yeah,
So, getting those good habits in early, it just can last a lifetime. So, getting those early bedtimes, and an overtired child will have a hard time going to bed,
hmm,
will have multiple wake ups at night, and will almost always start waking up early. So
yeah,
yeah, that will happen. And I understand in the summertime, we're into the summer now, getting into the summer now, and then you want to keep your kid up a little bit later. And when you have a sleep trained baby and you are consistent, like I said, consistency is key, and you do this
hmm,
all the time and you're in your routine. I strongly believe in the 80-20 rule. Whereas, like, if you put in the work and you get your child into a great routine, maybe you have one night that you're out a little bit later. And if you are in a great routine and you do it for 80% of the time and you're really, really serious about it, then that one time won't affect the next
right,
day too
yeah,
much. Or if you make up for it the next day and you pay attention to that and you make sleep a priority in your home, then it'll be okay. But as a general rule, early bedtime is one of my top suggestions for sure.
One thing I wanted to sort of point out too is that because my eldest also suffered with like night terrors, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what like it was, but basically every time I think it was about after 18 months or so, and I looked into it, and it seemed to start around that age group, I
Mm-hmm.
noticed. But um, where he'd wake up screaming and he looked like he was fully awake, and it was quite scary because
It's
I was
scary.
like, what's going on with him? And it lasted until he was probably about 4 or 5. But I noticed for him, I kind of was starting to like kind of watch what he was doing. If he went to bed after 8, it started. So I found that it's because he needed extra sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And with those kind of patterns, like it was every 90 minutes. So it was something to do with the sleep wake cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And if he went to bed too late, I noticed it was like on cue. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock whenever he would do it. So it was always a consistent thing. So that's why I was very adamant about putting them to bed earlier, because I knew for him, and even now he's 8 turning 9, like he still needs a good hour to sort of settle into bedtime routine. Like, so now he does go to bed obviously a little bit later, but he's not falling asleep until sort of like 9 o'clock now, because he's in bed around 7, 8, and he takes a long time to wind his brain down, but that's where we
Mm-hmm.
let him read or he reads to us.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think children that are their minds are very active, or they worry a lot, they tend to be the ones that sort of sit up a lot.
Yeah.
So again, getting them still into a good bedtime routine earlier so they're not so tired, right?
Yeah, yeah, and good for you for noticing those patterns, because that is what happens with night terrors. Is you can notice some of those patterns. So it happens with overtiredness for sure, and even just that little bit. He needed that extra sleep in the first half of the night. It happens with around fevers or stress, and that's when. And it is a scary. That's just a partial awakening, but
Yeah.
it's really. It's great that you did notice those patterns, and you can, that's also, it's important to note that based on what you're saying is like every child is different, and
Yeah.
so they all have their particular needs, and so you got to pay attention to what kind of needs your child is and it needs, and if they need to have that wind down time at the beginning of the night, and it often happens around that age group where you know uh, anxieties around sleep at
Mhm.
bedtime are happening at that age, because they watch TV, they see the news, there's certain things that are happening in
Right.
their day, and they have some of those little stresses, and they're thinking about it at nighttime when it's wind down time. So it's good to have those quiet activities of reading a book
Mhm.
and settling in, and some kids need that more than others.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's good to pay attention to those.
No.
And yeah, another thing I also stress to my parents is that with the younger kids, the daytime sleep is super important.
Mhm.
Again, a lot of parents will find that, oh, I'll keep my kids up during the day, and then
No.
they'll go to sleep better at
No.
nighttime. And like I just said, overtiredness is like
Yeah.
the killer of sleep. So, I'm sure you've heard sleep begets sleep. And it is true. And I could say it over and over and over again. And getting that solid rest in the middle of the day, and paying attention to those naps and paying attention to wake windows and following those patterns that your child needs in the beginning, during the day, will help them settle into sleep better, and
Yeah.
they'll welcome sleep easier at bedtime. So it'll make the whole
Yeah.
transition a lot
I
better.
noticed that too with my kids as well. I was almost, as a mom, I think you kind of sort of start to understand your kids once you've been around them quite a bit. But
Hmm.
I would always notice like ahead of time, like their sleep, sort of like where they would start to get tired. And it's
Hmm.
getting in front of that before it gets too late, because I
Hmm.
noticed if somebody else would have them that wouldn't like be around them too often. And I'm watching all the signs and stuff. I'm like, they're gonna have a meltdown like in like 5 minutes. I can see it, right? And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
waiting for it, right? Because you kind of get into this routine with them where you're like, yeah, they're tired, they're doing this or they're doing that, or they're kind of getting quieter or something. Like you kind of start picking up on your kids' cues. So
Right.
again, I think the parents that are like, oh, but I want to be active and go outside and take my kid with me and this and that, your kid's like kind of like trying to hold their eyes open all day, and then it's like about 4 or 5 o'clock they're going to want to really take a nap. And if you think about that, they're going to try and take a nap around dinner time, and then it's bedtime. So how is that going to
Yeah.
work? you
No,
know
no, no. I always stress to my parents that, because the last nap, that cat nap, is always tricky, and it depends on the age. But if you are going to get to that point where the cat nap is too late, you need to make an early bedtime.
Yeah.
And some parents will say a 6 o'clock bedtime, a 6:30. I can't. What? And
Yeah.
yes, do it. You're not doing it forever. And like I said, change. You got to welcome change.
Yeah.
Change is not forever. It's gonna be different in a few months from now. But you got to catch up on sleep early, because a little bit of overtiredness will
Yeah.
just turn in and escalate and turn into a ton of overtiredness, and then you're going to have, again, horrible bedtime struggles, wakings all over the place, early mornings, and then naps are
Yeah.
going to be fought. It just all rolls out one at a time. So
I
it's good to avoid.
I think my boys being a bit older, I think what's really helped is sort of the sleeping in weekend. Like, I think that was
Yeah.
like because again, I think a lot of parents are, oh, do I have to wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning at like the weekend and stuff? And that's usually how the day starts. So I love all the tips and everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring towards the moms to point out that we've talked about?
Yeah, and so another I'll point out one more thing about bedtime. So like I said, like consistency and early bedtimes and
Hmm.
paying attention to daytime will help. Daytime like naps and all that sleep will help for the evening. But we had touched on it a little bit, but I just want to stress it one more time that putting your child down awake at bedtime is very important.
Yeah.
And I know it's a hard thing sometimes to wrap your head around, and I get that, but having your child learn those independent sleep skills will not only help them to fall asleep on their own at bedtime, but it will keep them asleep throughout the night, and it will help them connect those sleep cycles. Once they got through one sleep cycle and they slightly wake up, if they need something to help them fall back asleep, they're in full wake up mode. So if they can put themselves back to sleep once they get to that next sleep cycle and they're sort of going to transition into it, they'll just maybe turn over, curl over, put a thumb in the mouth, or touch their face a little bit, cuddle up, and fall back asleep. And you won't even notice that they've woken up in the night. People wake up a ton of times in the night and you don't even necessarily notice. You switch sleep cycles, and it happens to everyone. And it happens to our children. So being able to connect those sleep cycles is crucial in staying asleep through the night. So putting your child down awake is a great tip.
I have a question on that one because I struggled with this one a little bit with my first. Again, because I probably trained him I put him to bed asleep, basically, because it was like I got him to sleep, but then I put him down and he'd wake up. And again, it was the no self-soothing. And then when he would turn over, wake up in the middle of the night, he wanted me again, right? And again, that was the crush. Looking back, I'm like, oh man, I should have done everything differently. But what is
when you're in it, it's hard. It's hard to see through it.
You're just surviving at that point, I think.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on crying out? Because I know there's a lot of people that are like, you should let him cry it out. And there's other people that like, you go in and just pick him up and then put him down, like kind of do. And I did that part. Like I went in, picked him up, put him down, and I was trying to sort of read about it. It was a lot of work at first because I had to do it so many times, but I noticed it was almost like he knew I was there, and then I'd kind of step out the room and, let him kind of self-soothe, right?
Right. Well, there's a misunderstanding about what sleep training is, and a lot of folks think that sleep training automatically is cry it out, and it's not. It is. It's called extinction method, and that is a method that definitely a lot of people use with sleep training, but there are other methods to use. And so I have gradual methods, and it depends on the age of your child with a pick up and put down. But there's other methods that you can use where you're in the room with them the whole time, or you're leaving and checking. And so it depends on the comfort of the parents. And so I don't necessarily, I don't believe in putting your child down and walking out and not coming back. But a lot of parents are comfortable with that because maybe going in and to a certain degree is creating an even bigger problem, and their child is crying even more. And so we work together, and I have a few methods that I use, and it's all based on the comfort of the parents, and it's based on the child and what is working for them. So if I find that a parent is sitting in the room and they're gradually leaving the room, and the child is getting upset every time the parent is close, well, maybe we need to just stand back a little bit further, because they just want you to come and comfort them, and they're not finding those skills to be able to fall asleep. So there's other methods out there. That's just one. And it really is what's good for you. This is, I'm always believing in, like, this is a non-judgment. This is a judgment-free zone. We work together to get you to meet your goals in a way that feels comfortable for you. So I always talk that through with my families.
No, that's great, because I think you're reading the situation, and I think that's probably what stopped me sort of going for a sleep consultant at first, because I was a bit worried, like in my head, that they would make me cry, like have him cry out, and like his crying made me have so much anxiety already that I wasn't sort of willing to, I guess, let that happen. Like I knew it was like a rip off the Band-Aid method, but definitely, I had to sort of undo all of the sort of crutches I put in my own way to get him to finally figure out how to fall asleep on his own. And it took a couple of years, unfortunately, but I kind of had to learn the hard way. And then, like I said, my second came along and was just like a champion sleeper, like right out the gate. I'm like, what?
There's always one. I know. So, but it really is, there's gradual methods of doing it. And obviously some of those can take longer, but it depends on the consistency. And, when I work with my families, I'm watching them every step of the way. We have a shared log that I'm there every day with them. And so, along with educating and supporting them and coaching them and getting them, motivating them to keep going. So, sometimes those some other methods could take a little bit longer for sure. But at the same time, really, it could be like a week or two. So that's not really so long in comparison to a few years of having, tough
I did it wrong, everybody. So
no. It is a huge learning curve, but I mean, there are other methods out there, and really I would urge folks to not shy away from
Definitely.
training because of that. So
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for coming on and giving us all these tips.
No
I should have
problem.
had you like honestly years ago. Like I don't know why I didn't have like I knew I needed it, but I was like, again, I think it's that resistance to change and like what was if like I have to
Definitely.
let my baby cry it out and then like my anxiety gets worse and stuff. So I
And I would
appreciate you
tell
coming on.
parents, and I would tell parents that if you are looking to make a change, like you are thinking, I want to make this change. I am not happy with the way
Mhm.
things are going. This is uncomfortable. I'm so tired. If you're really wanting to do it, whether you do it on your own or whether you hire someone for support, just do it. Just put
Yeah,
down that information, that the you know the goals that you want, how you want to get it done, and start today. Just
definitely.
just do it and get that done and get that sleep back in your home. You'll be much happier. Everyone will be will be much happier for
Exactly.
it. So
A healthy
I
family
say,
starts with a healthy
yeah,
parent. So
it
there you
really
go.
does. It really does.
Um,
So I'd say go for
so
it.
that's wonderful. Where can our viewers actually connect with you?
So you can check out my website at lullabygina.com. I also have, you can connect with me through there with a free 15-minute call and we can chat about what's going on. So feel free to do that. I also have my Instagram where I'm always sharing awesome tips and advice on pediatric sleep. So you can reach me there at lulla.by.gina. And yeah, on Facebook at Lullaby Gina Sleep. So
Awesome. I'm going to put those
can't
in
wait
the
to
show notes. And we also have a 7 sleep tip PDF as well
yeah.
that Gina has given to us here. So this is great. I should have had that like plastered on my wall back in the day, but
It's a good
I will use
reminder.
it like I had for one day, maybe another one. So there we go. But
Yeah.
thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really appreciate it, Gina, for coming on
No
to the
problem.
Nutritious and Delicious podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.